The Rebel Report is presented by the Gregory Law Firm. DJ Gregory for all of your small business, contract disputes, and personal injuries. 662-397-9799. The Gregory Law Firm, Saltillo, Mississippi. Intimate relationship with his clients. You're not just a number. You are a person. He'll build a relationship with you. DJ Gregory, the Gregory Law Firm, bringing you the Rebel Report from SEC Media Days in Dallas. Joining me right now, I'm going to call you my good friend. We've done this before. It's always enjoyable. We don't get to do it enough. Michael Katz of the Daily Journal. My friend, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man. Always a pleasure.
So, long day.
Yes.
Are you done?
I'm just doing the podcast rounds, which I consider a great privilege.
Stop.
So this is the best part of my day.
So obviously it's Ole Miss Day. Now, you guys are watching or listening to this a few days later, but still worth talking about, of course. Lane Kiffin today did really well, but let's start there. Very clearly, understandably, somber today would be the way I would describe it. Did an excellent job on the big stage, eulogizing essentially his father, but very clearly something that still is really affecting him. And that was a side of Lane that we just don't get to see very often, but it was raw and real.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to fathom how fresh it must be in having to come do this stuff, which probably doesn't seem super significant right now in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. But one of the things that he said his dad always taught him was you have to do your job regardless of what's happening, and I think that's probably helped Lane through this. But yeah, no, it's interesting because, like you said, we don't see the emotional side of Lane, and I think that's by design. I don't think that's, he's never been one to really wear his emotions on his sleeve for the most part. But he has always spoken really highly of his father and the impact he had on him, not just from the coaching perspective and helping him get his foot in the door in that regard, but it's always been about how he taught him how to deal with people, and that's something that he said he was always trying to get better at, like his father. And I think one of the really interesting things is, you've seen all of these eulogies come in for Monty from all these different teams and all these different people online. Of course, a lot of it has been about, the Tampa 2 defense and all his football things, but so much of it has been about what a good dude this was. And I think Lane made that part of it really clear today.
Very much so. So, like you said, seemingly everything else insignificant, but putting that aside to talk about football. Did you learn anything today?
Do we ever hear?
No, not really.
No, but, I think that, this was a really interesting media days for me because obviously the expectations are so high for Ole Miss. Yeah. This is a preseason, probably top 5 team, for sure top 10.
What were they on the video game? They were 4th, right, on the video game? Isn't that what they were, 4th or 5th?
Yeah, I think they were 5th. Okay. I haven't gotten to play it yet. I'm not rich and didn't buy the deluxe version.
Well, I'm not rich and don't have an updated system,
okay, well
so I'm going to be way behind.
That's going to hinder you. But I think what's interesting about, this is Texas and Oklahoma's media days. Right? That's what Sankey's opening statement was about for the most part today. He went like 15 minutes on the addition and how strong the conference is. And, if you think about SEC storylines, it's Texas and Oklahoma. It's Georgia as the preseason number 1. Like Ole Miss, it's weird because they are this preseason top 5 team, but like they're still sort of overlooked. Yeah. It's and I don't think that's a bad place to be. I think that's a really good place to be, especially for a program like Ole Miss, who hasn't always thrived under these sorts of circumstances. So it was interesting because, a lot of talk, of course, rat poison came up today, right?
Love it.
It was bound to.
Yeah.
But, Lane, he's learned from previous stops, right? And I think he's done a really good job of learning from his past. And, I was at USC in 2012 when, Lane this will be his second preseason top 10 team. The other one was the 2012 USC Trojans, who were preseason number 1 and went 7-6. And I asked him about that today. What did you learn from that experience? And he said, circumstances were different. We were under sanctions. We had roster limitations, which I actually forgot about. It's been so long.
Yeah, you're a USC guy.
I know. I am, for better or worse. Worse a lot of the time. But he said that, they probably leaned into the hype a little bit too much that year in 2012, they probably thought they were better than they really were. And if you talk to him, if you talk to any of the players we saw today, that's not the case. Like, yes, they know they're good. Of course they know they're good. But they don't want to talk about how good they are. And I think that's it's interesting to see. And, you know, you hear it during the spring. You know, we're still trying to figure out what this team is. I feel like we kind of know what this team is to an extent. You know, we're only, you know, we're a month plus out from when the season starts, and they still aren't buying into how good they're supposed to be in terms of, you know, all the stuff that's out there. So
and it feels real, doesn't it? I mean,
it feels absolutely genuine.
You've covered media days and different teams, and you've been all over the country in your career. You can see right through media-trained answers. Like, okay, this is what the SID told them to say before they made their rounds. I got the chance to talk to Trey Harris and Jared Ivey myself. Richard got to talk to Jackson, and I don't think that they're thinking about their answers. I think that's their answers. And we can't draw much away from just media ops, but it does feel real. Like that is exactly what their mindset is, as opposed to that's what the SID told them what their mindset should be.
100%. And you know, there's a reason these three guys are here, right? They're very thoughtful individuals. You don't have to tell them what to say or what not to say. But I think better than, you know, I think for the most part, I'm sure everybody on the team is at least told to think this way, but I think those guys embody it. Like, you want those people as representing your program for where it is right now. So I you know, I don't know if I learned anything from it today, but it was interesting to hear it actually talked about and how they handled it, and I think they handled it really, really well.
And you know, you're not from Mississippi, obviously. How long have you been on the beat? It's been a few years.
This is my 4th media days.
How about that?
I know.
So you've been around for a while. So at this point, you have a pretty good grasp of the history of Ole Miss and how few times they've been in this position. Now, we just mentioned the players and their mindset and the way they answered things, but this is the question I was preparing to ask you. Probably going to use it as the title to clickbait. Is Ole Miss ready for this moment?
You always take it with a grain of salt right now. I really do think so, and I think that's because this is a team that, you know, this transfer portal thing is all brand new. It's still fairly new, but like Lane has built different editions of transfer portal teams. In that first year, it didn't work great towards the end. The chemistry was just a little bit off, and they went on that slide towards the end of the year. Last year, it all clicked, right? You bring so many of those guys back as leaders who now don't even really seem like transfers. It seems like they've been here for a long time. And, yeah, you add all that new talent that everybody's been talking about in the transfer portal. I think that this is a battle-tested team that has seen both sides of what can happen when you collect talent. You know, again, you know, it's the cliche. I think Jordan Watkins said it during the spring that, you know, right now we're not a team, we're a roster of names. And, like, yeah, that's super corny. But you sort of believe it when they say it, that, like, they understand that like the chemistry really does matter. You can't just get a bunch of 5-star transfers and expect it to work. They tried that in 2022, and it started off really well and did not end very well.
There is something, it cracks me up, and I understand why he does it. He did it last year too, but Lane, he talked about that. In 22, they faced some adversity, and they folded, and that absolutely happened. That is very real. Something else also happened at the end of that season too, but there was something else going on too.
Something around the Egg Bowl, if I remember correctly.
But he, you know, he keeps things close to the vest. He very much doesn't elaborate on things like, hey, what does Jackson Dart need to improve on? Frankly, not a whole lot, because he didn't call him perfect. There are some things, protecting the ball, all that, but you don't hear him compliment people like that. And hearing him talk about his quarterback today is different, and it's not Jackson's got a big arm, he's a good athlete. It's my son's putting on a video game party tonight for the players, and if there was a leadership rating, Jackson would be a 99. That kind of stuff that's not just your typical praising your player thing.
It's really interesting to bring that up because when Jackson first got here, that was not how Lane talked about him.
No.
It was sometimes a little rough. He was very brutally honest about the turnovers and what he expected.
That relationship was sour.
Yes, and just it's crazy where they are now because they are in perfect harmony. They are in sync, and it seems genuine. I think they genuinely understand each other. Again, like I asked, what's the next step for Jackson? He's like, well, normally you would say X, Y, and Z, but he did some of those things already last year.
Yeah.
Again, bringing up, you brought up, the leadership rating. He just out of nowhere again brought up that if Jackson Dart ever wants to be a head coach, he can do it because he just has this way of bringing people together, and that's just not. He doesn't talk about a lot of people like that. He loved Matt Corral, and he talked about Matt, but Matt was different. He was a different personality than Jackson. Great leaders, but in different ways. He talks about Jackson this is a really important player to him. I think that he was really hard on Jackson, and I think he still is really hard on Jackson. But Jackson has just taken every obstacle that's come his way and just come out on top, and I think he really respects that.
For sure. So two other guys here. I told Jared Ivey that I'm mad at him because he's been in the podcasting game for 4 months and he's better than me at it. But aside from the media savvy that he clearly has, he's such an important player, and everybody focuses on, understandably so, Princely and Walter Nolan and the impact that they need to have. Jared Ivey at the end of last season was also a really quality player, and he didn't have, with all due respect to Cedric Johnson, he didn't have anybody on the other side that would command so much attention. I think Princely's addition could be great for Jared Ivey because he's going to command so much attention, and you're going to get so many one-on-one matchups, and he showed you against Penn State, a very, very, very good team with quality offensive linemen. He can feast when given the opportunity.
100%. I think that adding the talent they added up front in the portal, no one's going to benefit more than Jared because he's going to get those one-on-ones. Yeah. I think the really interesting thing about Jared Ivey is, and you get it every time whenever you talk to him, he is just a very measured, thoughtful guy that I think you understand that, yes, the physical attributes, we know he can ball. He's a ball player. But I think that the way that he can probably control a room and get people to temper their emotions I think he can talk things through with people. He talks us through everything. He's so meticulous and detailed in his answers. And I have to think that when you're bringing in all these new guys all the time, to have a guy like that who everybody can look to and say, hey, Jared, what are we supposed to do? I guarantee Jared knows what everybody's supposed to be doing on a given play.
What's this team's biggest weakness? It's hard to say. On paper, they don't have a true weakness. There are areas of concern for sure, but if you want to say the running back room's the weakness, okay, they've got Bentley, who's proven. They've got Parrish, who spent 4 years playing in the SEC/ACC, and Amos ran for 1,000 yards in the MAC last year, and when Diggs gets healthy, he was LSU's leading rusher. That's your weakness.
Yeah, no, I think it's the running back questions, though. It's always kind of it's not funny, but you look at just Lane's offenses at Ole Miss, and they have manufactured rushing yards. It doesn't matter what the situation was. His first couple of years, it was a sort of a three-headed monster, right? The last couple of years, it's been a lot of Judkins, and obviously Bentley had a little bit more of a role last year. It doesn't matter what that room looks like, and that's not to say those guys aren't talented. They have talent back there, obviously, but they're always going to figure out a way to run the ball. That's never. Quinshawn was a great player, but I think numbers-wise, I don't think they're going to miss a ton of production because they have a bunch of guys who are very capable, maybe of a group effort of filling that void. I guess for me, if I had to say, is this iffy? It might be linebacker. I'm just not 100% sure. Chris Paul Jr. he did great things at Arkansas. We haven't seen him in this defense.
Right.
Centurion Perkins is obviously in a little bit of a different role now. He's playing defensive end a lot now. So, what does his role look like? So, I think it was a question last year too at linebacker, and it still feels like is it in a better spot? Absolutely, especially because T.J. Dudley's there, and he'll have a full, season of being or full off seasons of
Corey Coleman.
Yes, absolutely. But you look at the defensive line, like you feel really good about that. You look at the secondary, and it is a lot of new names, but they're really talented names, and Pete Golding knows how to coach a secondary.
Yeah.
They're going to figure that out. I think linebacker, and again, I don't think it's going to be a problem, but I think if there's one area, if you look at all the different levels, that's one where I'm like, okay, I could see it maybe not being one of the stronger links.
Mm-hmm. And then last thing, I'll let you go. You've been really kind with your time, and I appreciate you. Lane Kiffin, after the Georgia game, you were there. You were in the room.
I sure was.
When he was just being honest. He was not throwing players under the bus, but he straight up said, that went down that way because their roster's different than mine. And that was true. During the game, you even had, I think it was Kirk Herbstreit during the game that was like, well, Pete Golding needs to try something different schematically. And I was just screaming. I was like, Kirk, there's nothing he can do.
They're just better.
Georgia's just better. Yeah. And Lane called it a length and size problem today. But he also said, I think that we addressed it, is the direct quote. I think that we addressed it. Hearing him be so confident about that's got to be encouraging. But if that's true, the ceiling is what everybody thinks it is. If it's not, they'll underachieve relative to expectation.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the talent they already had coming back and the talent they brought in, and you bring it in at the positions that you think were separating you from the upper echelon teams, if it's not now, when's it going to be? I think this is a fascinating year because, I think there's still a lot of coaches out there who aren't all in on the portal being the way to build a team, right? And in a perfect world, would Lane be recruiting?
Brian Kelly, I don't know if he took a shot at Lane or not today, but said that coaches that use the portal too much are showing that they're not good recruiters.
And he said something like, you don't want to have to depend on it for your upper echelon depth chart. And, that's whatever.
I get your point, but Walter Nolan's an upper echelon player on every single roster in America.
So is Prince Iman Mielen.
Exactly.
Trey
Harris.
Really. Yeah. So I think that, but I think it's really interesting because they've built this team this way, without traditional. I mean, they've gotten some good recruits in there, but that's not the main. If we're looking at the main pieces on this team, that's not how they've gotten there. This is like the ultimate test. Like if it works this year, then you've got the success story of you can build a team this way, and if it doesn't, what do you do? Because you kind of put all your eggs in this basket. I think this is going to be a fascinating experiment to watch.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you so much for your time, man.
Appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you. And we'll catch up much sooner. The last time was months ago.
It was a while.
We'll do it sooner.
Appreciate it, man.